Across the mists of deep time, from the forgotten dawn of human consciousness, a story has been whispered. It is a tale that echoes in the oldest myths, carved into the most ancient stones, and encoded in the very fabric of our most sacred traditions. It is a story of gods who descended from the heavens, of powerful beings who walked among mortals, and of a creation that was not an accident, but a deliberate act of cosmic engineering. For millennia, we have looked to the skies and wondered if we are alone. We have built great temples, composed epic poems, and waged terrible wars in the names of the gods we believed watched over us from on high. But what if the stories are more than just myths? What if the gods were not ethereal spirits, but beings of flesh and blood, travelers from another world who came to our planet in a time before time? This is the story of the Anunnaki, the Shining Ones, those who came from heaven to earth. It is a narrative that challenges the very foundations of our history, our religion, and our understanding of who we are. It suggests that the human race is not the product of a slow, unguided evolution, but the result of a direct and purposeful intervention. It whispers of a lost chapter in our history, a chapter that has been deliberately obscured, a chapter that, if revealed, could change everything. We journey back to the cradle of civilization, to the sun-scorched plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, where the first cities rose from the dust, and where humanity first learned to write down its thoughts, its laws, and its sacred stories. It is here, in the baked clay tablets of the Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonians, that we find the earliest and most detailed accounts of these mysterious beings. They were not described as gods in the way we understand them today, as abstract and distant deities. They were described as powerful, physical beings who lived, loved, fought, and ruled, just as humans do. They had a hierarchy, a society, and a home world, a wandering planet in our own solar system that the Sumerians called Nibiru, the planet of the crossing. The texts tell us that these beings, the Anunnaki, came to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago on a mission of survival. Their own world was dying, its atmosphere failing, and they had come to our planet for a single, precious resource: gold. Not for wealth, not for ornament, but for its unique properties, its ability to be ground into a fine white powder and used to repair the failing atmosphere of their home world. This is not a story of fantasy. It is the story that our oldest ancestors told us, a story that has been preserved for over 6,000 years, waiting for a generation that was ready to understand it. It is a story that forces us to ask the most profound questions imaginable. Who were the Anunnaki? Where did they come from? And what was their true role in the creation of humankind? The answers, if they can be found, lie buried in the sands of time, hidden in the cryptic language of ancient myths, and perhaps written in the very code of our own DNA. The Sumerian clay tablets, deciphered by scholars over the last century, paint a picture of our solar system that is both familiar and strangely alien. They speak of the sun and the moon, of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye, and even of Uranus and Neptune, planets that were not officially discovered by modern science until the 18th and 19th centuries. But they also speak of a 12th member of our solar system, a planet with a vast, elliptical orbit that brings it into our vicinity only once every 3,600 years. This was Nibiru, the home world of the Anunnaki. According to the texts, Nibiru was a world in peril. Its atmosphere was eroding, its climate was becoming increasingly hostile, and its people were facing extinction. Their scientists had devised a desperate plan to seed their upper atmosphere with a fine powder of monoatomic gold, creating a shield that would reflect the sun's radiation and stabilize their climate. But Nibiru was poor in gold. The Anunnaki, a technologically advanced and spacefaring race, began to search their solar system for the precious metal. They found it on Earth. The first expedition, led by a being named Enlil, landed on our planet in a time so remote that it defies our conventional understanding of history. The texts describe a world that was wild, untamed, and teeming with life. The Anunnaki established their first base in a region they called Eridu, the home in the faraway, located in what is now southern Iraq. They began the arduous task of mining the gold, first from the waters of the Persian Gulf, and then from deep within the earth in southern Africa. For tens of thousands of years, the Anunnaki toiled. They were a long-lived race, their lifespans measured in millennia, but the work was hard, the conditions were harsh, and the morale of the miners began to wane. The texts speak of a great mutiny, a rebellion of the working-class Anunnaki against their leaders. They had traveled across the vastness of space only to become slaves in the gold mines of a foreign world. They refused to work any longer. The leaders of the Anunnaki, a council of 12 great beings led by the brothers Enlil and Enki, were faced with a crisis. Their mission was in jeopardy. They needed a new source of labor, a new kind of worker, one that was intelligent enough to perform complex tasks, but subservient enough to obey orders without question. It was then that Enki, the chief scientist and geneticist of the Anunnaki, proposed a radical and audacious solution. He would not create a robot or a machine. He would create a new being, a primitive worker, by taking the existing hominids that were already evolving on the planet and upgrading their genetic code with the DNA of the Anunnaki themselves. He would, in his own words, create a Lulu, a primitive worker in the image of the gods. This was the moment that the destiny of our planet was forever changed. It was the moment that the Anunnaki ceased to be mere visitors and became creators. It was the moment that humanity, as we know it, was conceived. The ancient texts describe the creation of humanity not as a single event, but as a process of trial and error. Enki and his sister, the chief medical officer Ninhursag, conducted a series of genetic experiments in their laboratory, a place they called the House of Life. They blended the essence of the Anunnaki with the egg of a primitive hominid female, creating a series of hybrid beings. Many of these early experiments were failures, creatures that were sterile or deformed, beings that the texts describe in haunting and tragic detail. But eventually, they succeeded. They created a new being, a being they called the Adamu, the Earthling. He was a perfect hybrid, a being that possessed the physical strength and resilience of his terrestrial ancestors, but with the intelligence, the consciousness, and the capacity for speech of his celestial creators. The Adamu was the first human. He was, in the literal sense of the word, a child of the heavens and the earth. The creation of the Adamu solved the labor crisis. The new humans were put to work in the gold mines, and the Anunnaki were freed from their toil. But the creation of humanity also introduced a new and complex dynamic into the Anunnaki's mission. They were no longer just miners, they were now masters, rulers, and, in the eyes of their new creations, gods. The humans, who had been brought into existence by these powerful and mysterious beings, looked upon them with a mixture of awe, fear, and reverence. They saw the Anunnaki's advanced technology, their flying machines, their powerful weapons, their impossibly long lifespans, and they could only conclude that these beings were divine. The Anunnaki, for their part, did little to discourage this perception. They established a feudal society, with themselves at the top of the hierarchy and humanity as their loyal subjects. They built great cities, they established laws, they taught humanity the basics of agriculture, astronomy, and mathematics. They were, in every sense of the word, the founders of human civilization. The stories of these first gods are the stories of every ancient mythology. The Greek gods of Olympus, the Egyptian gods of the Nile, the Norse gods of Asgard, they all share a common and recurring theme. A pantheon of powerful humanoid beings who came from the sky, who ruled over humanity, and who were prone to the same passions, jealousies, and conflicts as the mortals they governed. The parallels between the Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki and the later myths of other cultures are too numerous and too specific to be a coincidence. The story of Enlil and Enki, the two rival brothers, is echoed in the stories of Cain and Abel, of Osiris and Set, of Zeus and Poseidon. The story of the Great Flood, a cataclysmic event that is described in detail in the Sumerian texts as a natural disaster that was foreseen by the Anunnaki, is a story that is found in over 200 cultures around the world. The story of a wise and compassionate God who chose to save a chosen human from the flood, the story of the Sumerian Ziusudra, is the story of the biblical Noah. It is as if all of our ancient myths are but different versions of a single primordial story. A story of our own creation, a story of our own forgotten history. But is there any physical evidence to support this extraordinary story? The ancient astronaut theory, the idea that Earth has been visited by extraterrestrial beings in the distant past, has long been a subject of fascination and ridicule. But in recent years, a growing body of evidence has emerged that is forcing us to reconsider the possibility. We find it in the colossal and inexplicable megalithic structures that are scattered across the globe, from the pyramids of Giza to the standing stones of Stonehenge, from the giant heads of Easter Island to the impossible stonework of Pumapunku in Bolivia. These are structures that were built with a level of precision and a mastery of engineering that seems to be far beyond the capabilities of the primitive cultures that are credited with their construction. We find it in the ancient artwork of every culture, in the cave paintings, the petroglyphs, and the sculptures that depict strange, non-human figures in what appear to be helmets and spacesuits, strange flying objects in the sky, and strange celestial maps that chart constellations that are not visible from Earth. We find it in the ancient texts themselves, in the detailed descriptions of flying machines, of powerful weapons, of genetic engineering, of a knowledge of astronomy and physics that seems to be thousands of years ahead of its time. The Sumerian texts, for example, contain a detailed knowledge of the precession of the equinoxes, a complex astronomical cycle that takes over 25,000 years to complete. How could a primitive culture in the very dawn of civilization have possessed such knowledge? We find it in the mysteries of our own biology, in the sudden and inexplicable appearance of Homo sapiens, a species that seems to have emerged out of nowhere with a brain that is far larger and more complex than it needs to be for mere survival. We find it in the strange and anomalous artifacts that have been discovered all over the world, objects that seem to be out of place and out of time, objects like the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek astronomical computer of astonishing complexity, or the Baghdad battery, a simple clay pot that seems to have been used to generate electricity over 2,000 years ago. Each of these mysteries, taken in isolation, can perhaps be explained away. But when taken together, they begin to form a pattern, a mosaic of evidence that points to a single, startling conclusion. We are not who we think we are. Our history is not what we have been told. We are a species with amnesia, a species that has forgotten its own origins, a species that is only now beginning to wake up to the truth of its own extraordinary past. The reign of the Anunnaki on Earth was not eternal. The ancient texts tell us that after hundreds of thousands of years, their mission was complete. They had mined enough gold to repair their homeworld's atmosphere. The time had come for them to leave. Their departure was a gradual process, a slow withdrawal that took place over many generations. They established a dynasty of human kings, a line of rulers who were themselves part Anunnaki, a line of demigods who were chosen to govern humanity in their stead. They gave humanity the gifts of civilization, the knowledge of writing, of law, of kingship, of science, and then they left. Their departure is recorded in the myths of every culture as the end of a golden age, the time when the gods walked among men. It was a time of great sadness and confusion for humanity. They had been abandoned by their creators, left to fend for themselves in a world that was still filled with danger and uncertainty. But the Anunnaki did not leave without a promise. They promised that they would one day return. This promise of a second coming is a theme that is found in almost every religion and mythology in the world. The return of the Messiah, the return of the Mahdi, the return of Quetzalcoatl, the return of the gods. It is a universal and deeply ingrained hope. A hope that our creators have not forgotten us, a hope that they will one day come back to finish what they started. What is the legacy of the Anunnaki? It is a legacy that is all around us, a legacy that is so pervasive, so fundamental, that we have ceased to even notice it. It is the legacy of our civilization, of our science, of our religion, It is the legacy of our very existence. We are their children, their creation, their grand and unfinished experiment. The story of the Anunnaki is a story that is both deeply unsettling and profoundly inspiring. It is unsettling because it challenges our most cherished beliefs about our own uniqueness, about our own special place in the universe. It suggests that we are not the masters of our own destiny, but the product of a foreign intelligence, a species that was created for a purpose that was not our own. But it is also inspiring, because it suggests that we are part of a much larger and more magnificent cosmic story. It suggests that we are not alone, that we are connected to a vast and ancient galactic family, that we are the inheritors of a legacy that is as old as time itself. It suggests that our potential is far greater than we have ever dared to imagine, that we are, in a very real sense, the children of the stars. The search for the Anunnaki is the search for ourselves. It is the search for our own lost history, for our own forgotten identity. It is a search that will take us to the farthest reaches of the planet, to the deepest layers of our own consciousness, and perhaps one day back to the stars from whence we came. The story is not over. The final chapter has not yet been written. The gods of our ancestors may be gone, but their legacy remains. A silent and powerful presence that continues to shape our destiny. A mystery that calls to us from across the ages. A question that is waiting to be answered. The threads of this extraordinary narrative are not confined to the ancient Near East. They are woven into a global tapestry of myth and legend. When we look at the creation stories of cultures that had no known contact with each other, we find the same strange and specific details repeated time and time again. The story of a sky god and an earth goddess whose separation creates the world. The story of a pantheon of gods with human-like passions and conflicts. The story of a great flood that wiped out a previous age of humanity. The story of a wise being who saves a chosen few. The story of divine beings who interbreed with mortals, creating a race of heroes and demigods. These are not just vague archetypes. They are specific narrative elements, a shared genetic code that runs through the body of world mythology. Consider the story of the Titans in Greek mythology, a race of powerful, older gods who were overthrown by the younger Olympians in a great celestial war. Is this not a retelling of the Anunnaki story of the rebellion of the younger gods against the older generation? Consider the story of the Hindu Vedas, which speak of flying machines called Vimanas, of powerful weapons called astras, and of a great war between the gods that was fought in the heavens. Is this not a description of a technological, extraterrestrial conflict? Consider the legends of the Maya and the Aztecs in Mesoamerica, who spoke of a white, bearded god named Quetzalcoatl who came from the east, who taught them the arts of civilization, and who promised to one day return. Is this not the story of an Anunnaki leader, a civilizing hero, who left a lasting legacy on a distant continent? The conventional explanation for these similarities is that they are the result of a shared human psychology, of a universal need to explain the world through story. But this explanation begins to break down when we look at the sheer specificity of the details. Why would so many different cultures, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, independently invent the story of a great flood, of a celestial war, of gods who descend from the sky in flying chariots? A more radical and perhaps more logical explanation is that these are not inventions at all, they are memories. They are the fragmented and distorted recollections of a real historical event, an event that was so profound, so transformative, that it left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of our entire species. They are the echoes of a time when our ancestors walked with gods. A time when the boundary between the human and the divine, between the terrestrial and the extraterrestrial, was not yet fixed. The gods of our ancestors were not metaphors, they were real. And their story is our story. The physical evidence for this lost chapter of our history is as compelling as it is controversial. It is a body of evidence that has been ignored, dismissed, and suppressed by mainstream academia, because it does not fit into the neat and tidy narrative of human history that we have been taught. But the stones cry out. In the highlands of Bolivia, at an altitude of over 12,000 feet, lies the ruins of Puma Punku, a site that defies all conventional explanation. Here, we find massive blocks of diorite, one of the hardest stones on the planet, that have been cut with a precision that is simply not possible with the primitive tools that are supposed to have been used. The cuts are perfectly straight, the angles are perfectly right, and the surfaces are polished to a mirror-like finish. Some of the blocks have complex, interlocking shapes, as if they were designed to be fitted together like a giant, three-dimensional puzzle. This is not the work of a Stone Age culture. This is the work of a culture that possessed a level of technology that is at least as advanced as our own, and perhaps far more so. In southern Turkey, we find the site of Göbekli Tepe, a vast and ancient temple complex that has been dated to over 12,000 years ago, a time when humanity was supposed to have been living in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. The site consists of a series of massive, T-shaped pillars, many of them weighing over 20 tons, that are arranged in a series of concentric circles. The pillars are covered with intricate carvings of animals, of symbols, and of strange, humanoid figures. The construction of Göbekli Tepe would have required a level of social organization, of engineering skill, and of artistic expression that is simply not supposed to have existed at that time. It is a site that pushes back the timeline of human civilization by over 6,000 years, a site that suggests that our history is far older and far more mysterious than we have ever imagined. And then there are the countless smaller anomalies, the out-of-place artifacts that have been found all over the world. The intricate gold figurines from South America that look for all the world like modern fighter jets. The ancient Indian texts that contain detailed instructions for building flying machines. The maps of the ancient sea kings, maps that show the coastline of Antarctica as it would have looked without its ice cap, a condition that has not existed for millions of years. This is not the evidence of a slow, linear progression from primitive to advanced. This is the evidence of a lost golden age, of a time when a high civilization, a civilization that was perhaps not entirely of this world, flourished on our planet. It is the evidence of a history that has been forgotten, a history that is only now beginning to be rediscovered. The implications of this revised history are staggering. If we are the product of an extraterrestrial intelligence, if our civilization is the legacy of a lost golden age, then what does that say about our future? Are we destined to repeat the mistakes of our creators, to fall victim to the same pride, the same conflicts, the same self-destructive tendencies that seem to be a recurring theme in the Anunnaki story? Or are we capable of learning from their example, of transcending our own limitations, of becoming the masters of our own destiny? The story of the Anunnaki is a mirror. It reflects our own highest aspirations and our own darkest fears. It is a story of creation and destruction, of love and war, of wisdom and folly. It is the story of a family of gods, a family that was as brilliant as it was dysfunctional, a family that, in its quest for survival, gave birth to a new and unique form of life, a form of life that was destined to inherit the earth. We are that life. We are the children of the Anunnaki. And the time has come for us to claim our birthright. The time has come for us to remember who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. The time has come for us to look to the stars, not with fear, but with a sense of recognition, a sense of homecoming. The truth is not out there, it is within us. It is in our myths, in our legends, in our sacred texts. It is in the very blood that flows through our veins. The Anunnaki are not gone, they are a part of us. And their story is our story, a story that is still unfolding. A story that is leading us to a future that is more fantastic, more challenging, and more glorious than we have ever dared to dream. The final, and perhaps most profound, piece of this puzzle lies not in the ancient stones or the cryptic texts, but in the very code of life itself. The human genome, the blueprint of our existence, is a document of breathtaking complexity, a library of information that we are only just beginning to learn how to read. And what we are finding there is a series of mysteries that defy all conventional explanation. We find that the human genome contains over 200 genes that have no precedent in the entire evolutionary tree. They are genes that appear out of nowhere, genes that seem to have been inserted into our DNA from an outside source. We find that our DNA is filled with vast stretches of non-coding sequences, so-called junk DNA, that do not seem to have any biological function. But what if this is not junk at all? What if it is a dormant code, a set of instructions that is waiting to be activated, a legacy from our creators that is yet to be revealed? The story of the Anunnaki is a story that is written in the language of myth, of stone, and of blood. It is a story that has been waiting for us to rediscover it, a story that has the power to transform our understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. It is a story that is not yet over. The gods of our ancestors may have left, but their presence is still with us, a silent and powerful force that continues to shape our destiny. And as we stand on the threshold of a new age, an age of space exploration and genetic engineering, we are, in a very real sense, becoming the gods that we once worshipped. We are taking control of our own evolution. We are reaching for the stars. We are on the verge of becoming the masters of our own destiny. The question is, will we be wise and benevolent creators? Or will we fall victim to the same pride, the same conflicts, the same self-destructive tendencies that seem to be a recurring theme in the story of our own creators? The answer to that question lies not in the stars, but in ourselves. The legacy of the Anunnaki is a double-edged sword. It is a legacy of immense power and of immense responsibility. It is a legacy that we are only now beginning to understand. And it is a legacy that will, in the end, determine the future of our species. The journey into the world of the Anunnaki is a journey into the heart of mystery itself. It is a path that is fraught with controversy, with speculation, and with the constant challenge of separating fact from fiction. But it is a journey that we must take, for in the end, the story of the Anunnaki is not just a story about the past, it is a story about the future. It is a story that reminds us that we are not the pinnacle of creation, but a single fleeting note in a vast and ancient cosmic symphony. It is a story that challenges us to look beyond the narrow confines of our own history, our own culture, our own planet, and to embrace a larger and more magnificent vision of who we are and what we can become. The gods of our ancestors are calling to us. They are calling to us from across the ages, from across the vastness of space. They are calling to us to remember our own forgotten history, to remember our own divine heritage, to remember that we are, and have always been, the children of the stars. The story of humanity's creation and early history is not a simple one. It is a drama, a cosmic play, and its central conflict is the rivalry between the two most powerful of the Anunnaki leaders, the brothers Enlil and Enki. They were the sons of Anu, the supreme ruler of Nibiru, and they represented two opposing philosophies, two different visions for the future of their mission and for the future of their new creation, humanity. Enlil was the commander, the disciplinarian, the one who was focused solely on the mission. He was a stern and often ruthless leader who viewed humanity as nothing more than a tool, a resource to be used and controlled. He was the one who had argued against the creation of the Adamu, fearing that these new beings would become too numerous, too noisy, and too difficult to manage. He was the God of the Old Testament, a God of wrath and judgment, a God who demanded absolute obedience and who was quick to punish any transgression. Enki, on the other hand, was the scientist, the artist, the compassionate one. He was the one who had a deep and abiding love for his creation. He saw in humanity not just a worker, but a child, a being of immense potential, a being that was capable of great things. He was the one who, against the orders of Enlil, chose to give humanity the gift of knowledge, the gift of procreation, the gift of self-awareness. He was the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the bringer of light, the one who sought to liberate humanity from its bondage, to raise it up to the level of the gods themselves. This conflict between Enlil and Enki is the central drama of the Sumerian texts. It is a story of political intrigue, of sibling rivalry, and of a deep and abiding philosophical disagreement about the nature of power, of creation, and of the relationship between the gods and their subjects. It was Enlil who, in his anger and his frustration with the growing and increasingly unruly human population, sought to destroy humanity in the Great Flood. It was Enki who, in his compassion and his love for his creation, chose to save a single human, Zeus Sudra, by giving him the secret knowledge needed to build an ark. This story, the story of a great flood and a chosen survivor, is a story that is found in almost every culture on Earth. It is a story that speaks of a time when the gods were at war with each other, a time when humanity was caught in the crossfire of a cosmic conflict that was far beyond its understanding. The legacy of this conflict is still with us today. It is the legacy of a deep and fundamental division in the human psyche, a division between the part of us that seeks to obey, to conform, to submit to authority, and the part of us that seeks to question, to rebel, to reach for the stars. It is the conflict between the path of Enlil and the path of Enki, the path of the priest and the path of the shaman, the path of the soldier and the path of the scientist. It is the eternal struggle between the forces of control and the forces of liberation, a struggle that has shaped the course of human history and a struggle that continues to define the human condition to this very day. The departure of the Anunnaki did not bring an end to their influence. It simply changed its nature. They were no longer physical rulers, but distant and powerful gods, their stories preserved in the sacred texts and oral traditions of the cultures they had founded. They became the archetypes, the divine patterns upon which human society was modeled. The concept of kingship, of a divinely ordained ruler who acts as an intermediary between the heavens and the earth, is a direct legacy of the Anunnaki. The first human kings were not just political leaders, they were priest kings, men who were believed to be descended from the gods, men who were entrusted with the sacred duty of maintaining the cosmic order. The great religions of the world, with their complex hierarchies, their elaborate rituals, and their sacred laws, are all echoes of the Anunnaki's own society. The idea of a single, all-powerful sky god, a god of law and order, is the legacy of Enlil. The idea of a more personal, more compassionate, more human-like god, a god of wisdom and of secret knowledge, is the legacy of Enki. The very structure of our societies, the division of labor, the creation of cities, the development of laws, the pursuit of science, these are all gifts from the gods, a cultural DNA that was passed down to us from our celestial ancestors. But it is a legacy that has been misunderstood. A legacy that has been twisted and distorted over the millennia. The stories of the gods have been turned into instruments of control, tools that have been used by the powerful to justify their own authority, to wage wars, to oppress the weak. The science of the gods has been forgotten, replaced by a blind and dogmatic faith. The true history of our species has been buried under layers of myth, of superstition, and of deliberate obfuscation. We are a species with amnesia, a species that has forgotten its own divine origins. And in our forgetting, we have become lost. We have become a species that is at war with itself, a species that is destroying its own planet, a species that has lost its connection to the cosmos. The story of the Anunnaki is a wake-up call. It is a call to remember. It is a call to reclaim our own lost history, to rediscover our own divine potential. It is a call to look beyond the narrow confines of our own tribal and religious identities and to embrace a larger and more inclusive vision of who we are. We are not just Americans or Russians, Christians or Muslims, black or white. We are all children of the Anunnaki. We are all members of a single global family, a family that is bound together by a shared and extraordinary history. And it is only by remembering that history, by embracing that shared identity, that we can hope to create a future that is worthy of our divine heritage.